I mean, we were talking a lot about Jacob, and he still has a story, so I feel like we can have a conversation about your character as well. I mean, there's a lot to
Yep.
say because there's, a lot of interesting subjects in the game itself if you do play it. But getting to know him, I mean, what was the hardest part about getting into Jacob's headspace? Because there's quite a lot of challenges he faced in his storyline.
Totally. I think the biggest part is the sort of mystery of it all. It felt very Minority Report to me. So there was, and you get, it's not like you get a whole script at once, usually. Um, you get pieces of a story, and the director was kind enough to lay out all of the plot points or as much of them as possible. I didn't get the end, the finale, so to speak,
Okay.
which was a surprise to me.
Okay.
Um, but in terms of sort of the mystery of my greatest challenge was figuring out how much to leak when, because the whole premise of the story is a person who is missing pieces of their own memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I, as a artist and as an actor, can't have the same gaps that the character has, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
mm,
Like there are things that the character should not know that I should know as an
mm.
actor.
Okay.
And sometimes the disparity between what you're playing and what you know can be difficult. Basically, you don't want to give away the secret before the secret is given away.
Mm,
Um, and when we were sort of toggling Jacob's emotions, like how does he show up to get a job done without being a complete robot of a person, right?
mm.
Because we played a lot with over the change for Jacob from the beginning of the story to the end of the story was that he was going to come in quite closed off and quite um, unknowing. Like there would be a lot of mystery for him, and therefore he would be a person who wasn't conveying a lot to the outside world. But one, how do you make that interesting to a viewer? Somebody who's intentionally not doing much for the other person because they're wary or they're on guard. And that by the end, he would keep unraveling and get more, increasingly more sensitive as the game went on, as he found out more pieces of his past to
Mm.
be vulnerable by the end, right? Um, and also the balance of not being so stereotypically military,
Yeah.
because in my time, I've trained with military people for various projects that I've been on,
Okay.
and
Wow.
I I find them absolutely fascinating as human beings. And putting politics aside and like whether or not you agree with the military industrial complex, all of that, my job as an actor is to find empathetic ways to understand people. And these people have a psychology that is fascinating to me. And there's
Mm.
so much stereotypical alpha male bullshit about playing soldiers. And there's that's part of their culture. Like I'm not gonna, I don't want to denigrate it. Like it's like they don't do any of the macho stuff. They definitely do.
Mm.
But I get pretty annoyed when I see people who are playing soldiers and everything is like testosterone in veins and raspy voice grunting,
Yeah. Yeah.
because all the people that I've met who either have served, are serving, are first of all incredibly intelligent, like
Mm.
much more intelligent than I usually see them portrayed. They're usually shown, even army grunts, as like just like pawns, and I've always seen them more as the chess player. They're not pawns, at least when they are on a one-on-one conversation,
Yeah.
right? And how you watch them in their own story of their own life.
Yeah.
Um, and they're also, particularly the ones who are out of service now, their ability to self-reflect, if they're willing to talk to me and to do stuff like train actors so that we get the things right, like how to shoot, how to clear a room, how to run down a town, all that sort of stuff. This is a person who's done enough self-reflecting to to share things that don't happen to normal people.
Mm.
And they will have to have processed their own traumas, of which, like, let's be serious, war has a lot of them.
Mm.
And I often see portrayals of soldiers as sort of like it's like a paint by numbers.
Yeah.
Like we know they all have PTSD, and it always manifests in like the 1,000 yard stare, and
Mm.
like they don't know how to fit into society, and those things are true,
Yeah.
but I think I only see one version of those things. when the people that I actually meet are a bunch of different colors of those things.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you mentioned quite a lot about memory there. I mean, do you think memory manipulation and control is really a thing as well? Because it's in the
You mean it?
game as well. What's that?
Do I think that in the world or in the game?
In the world in general, do you think it's an accurate thing being portrayed?
I won't speak to whether or not I think that, for example, some nefarious CEO installing a chip in someone's brain and being able to edit, like in
Yeah.
Minority Report, for example. I won't posit whether or not I think that's true because that's a pretty large conspiracy theory vibe, and I tend to speak from things that I feel like I have some amount of expertise on.
Mm,
Or caveat is like, this is my opinion, could not be more opinion, not an expert, right?
mm,
Um, but I think as it is, like our narratives are already manipulated all the time, right? It's about like what information do you say and not say. Um, and so, for example, of the millions of global conflicts happening in the world, there are two getting a lot of press and one more than any other, right? That affects the global narrative.
mm,
Where you get your information from affects the narrative. And I'm instituting narrative in place of memories only because I feel like the question begs both. And so rather than saying on an individual level, I'm manipulating whether or not you, Lloyd, remember your 13th birthday,
yeah, yeah,
I do think that it is actively happening that I, media slash government, am controlling what Lloyd, I have no idea how old you are now, but 20 something year old man is
32.
intaking on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah,
How old?
yeah, 32. But yeah, no, carry on. It's cool.
There you go. Look at that. You've been using your moisturizer, Lloyd. You're keeping young.
No, yeah, continue. No, that was getting interesting though.
Just essentially the idea that and I don't think it's like some cabal of like 12 people in a room that are nefariously twirling mustaches being like, no, delete that from the headline. Like, I don't think that's how it works. I think it's just they figured out long ago that people are more prone to buying sensationalized news than they are buying the news that is like, hey, your neighbors aren't trying to steal from you. And yeah, the economy's dipping a little bit, but like, you're not going to feel it in your pocketbook all that much right now.
Mm,
Like, it's more capitalist to be like, no, everything's on fire and you need to blame somebody, and it probably is someone you don't know. Go.
mm,
That same way, while it's not a chip in any of our brains, it is absolutely something that is being sort of curated.
mm,
Like the information that we're given is being curated for each
mm,
of us. And it's only gotten worse with social media and the algorithms that learn from what you like. It tailors the information that you're receiving to what you like. So if you have a particular political leaning, it will give you content that reinforces that leaning. Or if you're a person who wants to rail against something, you start clicking on the opposition party's posts and you start reading and spending time
yeah,
interacting with it. Then the algorithm goes, okay, great. This is the kind of
that's what they
content you
want.
want.
Mm,
I don't care if you agree with it or not. It doesn't matter to me if it's making you happy or
mm,
sad. All I care
mm,
about is that you're spending time interacting with my app.
yeah,
So now you're going
yeah,
to get more of this politician you hate so that you can yell at your friends about it.
yeah.
Right.
They're definitely listening and watching to what you see. I think. I feel like that is a thing. That is a thing.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think the themes in Mind's Eye of that big brother, politicians and technocrats making deals behind closed doors. For example, Silva selling these cop bots to the town, to Red Rock,
mm,
to police them. Right? What are the aims of that? Why? What vested interests might he have other than trying to keep people safe and making a little bit of money to do that? Or,
mm,
for example, the idea of collecting biological data from a soldier who is getting this implant put in his head. I mean, I think we see evidence of that sort of thing all the time.
yeah,
Even as simple as like, it doesn't have to be biological. Your cookies are a form of the exact same thing, just on a really micro scale,
mm,
right? And what we would all agree, or maybe not all agree, what many of us feel is a less invasive scale.
mm,
So if someone was to say, "Hey, I want to record your heart rate, your blood sugar level, your sleep patterns, et cetera, every day for the rest of your life," you might be like, "That's really intense. Like, I don't want you to put something in me that allows you access to all of my biological data." And
Mm.
you'd say no. Someone says, hey, can I just like record what websites you go to on the internet and then like use that to advertise to you more directly?
Yeah.
Not everyone says yes, but plenty of people are like, I don't give a fuck what you, yeah, whatever. You see that I like to buy skinny jeans, not
Mm.
normal cut jeans, or see that I really like rugby and not soccer.
Mm.
I don't care. What does that
Yeah.
matter? That's not important to me.
Yeah.
Even the idea of your uh, credit card data being on every purchase you make online, your address, your phone number, your social security number, or whatever it is that you all use in the UK. Like, this is all information that's just out there. And to
Mm.
me, it is not really any different than putting a chip directly in your brain
Yeah.
that you sort of crowdsource this information at will for free,
Yeah. You
right?
don't even need a chip now, do you? Or an implant is it's just right in front of you, really. So
Even the idea of having your like unlocking your phone with your face,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I can't. I'm definitely. I'm not an expert. Like I
Mm.
said, I would not be surprised if like that is a form of data that is being collected. Like we as actors, for example, in the video game industry in America, we were on strike for almost a year
Mm.
over various AI protections, and a big part of it was that in games, your digital avatar, as we call it, right? The scan of you, the thing that is, let's say I say, Lloyd, I'll give you some money. You're going to sit in this crazy techno contraption. A bunch of lights are going to go off. I'm going to capture your face and your body. You
Mm.
say, cool, I'll take that money and we'll roll. That's one thing. You're informed and you are making a consent to have that scan be made.
Yeah.
What if I said, hey, Lloyd, every time that you face scanned your iPhone, I can just get that. I can go scoop that off the internet. Or every time you've done one of these interviews, I'm going to go scrape all that data for
Yeah.
free. You're not going to get paid. And now the technology's caught up where I can make an exact replica of your face. So this
Wow.
interview, we don't need you anymore. You're done. We are going to conduct the interview with Lloyd, the AI, with whoever, whatever guests we want to have, and we'll see you later. And
That's
then you sue
crazy.
them and they say, it's for free. There's
Mm.
no laws. It's public domain. You've been putting your face data out there this whole time. And so that was part of the strike that we were on. And part of one of the themes of this game is the ability for a government or a
Wow.
technological institution to be conducting this sort of large scale research on people for free
Wow.
and without consent.
That's crazy. The games really are trying to warn us, aren't they? They're trying to put something across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the idea, like there's so many different things, like the Silva Vega relationship, Marco Silva, the t- the technocrat figure, and Shiva Vega, the mayor of Red Rock. The idea of someone in that technological position being buddy buddy with a politician came long before Musk and Trump was a thing. Like there are a
Mm.
number of different things in the game that now feel like I'm sure that other people go, well, this isn't that mind blowing because it happened in real life and you just did the thing. When they've been developing this game since 2016, that relationship of like Elon Musk buying a politician and being buddy buddy was
Wow.
there almost 10 years ago. Like they were just saying, this is what it looks like in the future, or this
Wow.
is what it probably will look like in the future, right?
They don't
Even
want us. They don't want us playing the game for a reason. Then they've caused these glitches, to stop us from playing the game. I think.
forget Rockstar, dude. It
Yeah.
was all the way at the top. It was Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. The
I'll be
glitches
real.
are implanted. That's crazy. You never know.
uh, but even the idea of, for example, as climate change worsens and things change, there was a vision of Red Rock as a place that was one of those areas that were going to be heavily affected by climate change, right? And
Mm.
so even the opening of the game of coming in and sort of like looked a little more Mad Max, where it was like everyone was using respirators whenever they were outside because that was just the new environmental reality. Was that like when you were inside, you're fine because they have climate control and blah blah blah, but anyone going outside was going to have on this respirator thing. Um, and it was scrapped at some point. Who knows why? Again, that's not my purview. But all of these sort of little details predicting like this is the way that the world is going to work as a result of the technology, the environment, all these various things moving forward. And I think that's one of the cool things. One of the things that drew me to the project was that when they were telling me about the world and about the story, this sort of idea of future casting. And of course, you're not trying to make it's a video game. At the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun for people to interact with and play.
Mm,
Not trying to make a like a morality tale about here's the handmaiden's tale of what the future is going to be,
mm,
right?
mm,
But the same way that BioShock was able to take the idea of this like utopia and what would it look like if someone actually tried to enact that and it all went awry,
mm.
right? I am particularly drawn to stories that involve some element of that.
How do you think Jacob feels about, being monitored by machines?
I mean, it's I think he's unaware until he's aware, right? Like
Mm,
he has no idea. He's just signed up to do his job and is willing. I think Jacob is fascinated by technology and the when he was in the military, the prospect of first, being a drone pilot. That's just
mm,
sort of like a childlike fascination of, man, these things are dope, and I want to learn all about this tool, right? I want to learn how to use this thing that other people don't.
mm,
Then he's offered, hey, this implant will let you use an even more interesting version of this technological invention.
mm,
And I think like a lot of people without giving full consideration to the consequences, signs up. He says yes. He signs the terms and conditions without necessarily looking through everything. And if we're being honest, the way that the story is set up, there's some amount of nefarious, like, who knew what? He clearly was not given all of the information as to what the mind's eye implant was going to be, um, which I think is a pretty common thing in terms of how we progress forward in modern medicine. Maybe not anymore with like ethical quandaries and things like that, but once upon a time, you're giving some soldier ether and then sawing through them with a handsaw to develop modern surgery. Like that's just the nature of experimenting with something that you don't know what the consequences are going to be.
mm.
So I think once Jacob comes out of that experience and where we're in the point that we are introduced to him in the game, um, obviously he's anti. Like this has not been a great process for him. It sort of has caused his life to fall apart. Um, and the whole reason that we launch on this story is so that he can figure out what the hell actually happened and why. Um, so yeah, I think he comes from a place of ignorance to a place of resentment and revenge in
Wow.
in many ways. Of like, I need to figure out who did this
Mm.
so I can get him.
So it goes from
Uh,
dark to dark, basically.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Wow. What does, Jacob's journey sort of say about trust in a world being run by machines and AI?
I think he puts a lot of value in human relationships, but it is difficult. It is difficult to know who's on your side,
Mm,
right? And those relationships were always in flux. Like I think he's deeply distrustful of authority for sure. So even when it comes to Rigby and Silva, it takes an incredible amount of time for them to win Jacob's trust over. It takes the majority of the game for him to care about either of those two characters. And for example, Silva is on the fence. Like by the end, he's fine with him, but I wouldn't say he's overwhelmed with him. Whereas Rigby, I feel like he finds an actual ally. Like by the end of the game,
mm,
there's a mutual respect and care. They've both saved each other, physically, like they've saved each other's lives, but also um, psycho emotionally, they're both very guarded people who come to this mutual respect and saying, like, all right, you're one of the good ones. I think in terms of Seb and Charlie, the Seb dynamic went many different ways. Like it was over the course of the years that I was working on the game and the narrative, that relationship started as one of like they were childhood friends, like grew up on the same block. They were really, really deep. Then it was like, actually, no, Seb is the little brother of someone that Jacob used to be really tight with. So Jacob, in some ways, is using this guy. He's sort of playing on the relationship of the brother, not really Seb himself, and ultimately settling on like there's a there's a known quantity there, but they weren't childhood besties. This is not him calling his boy, being like, "Hey, we're in it together." Like, and if I'm being honest, that was probably the most difficult version of that relationship. I kind
mm,
of like I do really enjoy Gray, but there was something about that relationship that for me I wanted clarity as to like this dude is either my homie, like straight up ride or die, and from
Mm,
jump I knew I could trust him and count on him, or I don't know you at all. I'm actually fully pulling a string and I'm manipulating you. Like
yeah.
someone used me and now I'm using you, and you're being duped just as much as anybody else. Um, Going back to how does Jacob feel about those relationships? I think the relationship with Charlie, in Charlie, he sees someone else who has been deeply taken advantage of, has lost someone that she cares about, even though we never actually meet the character of Gil. Like in her, he sees someone who's also kind of hurt puppy. And funnily enough, I spoke with the on-set director, and we were talking about how usually male female relationships are always very will they won't they romantically, like
Mm,
we know that these people are going to end up together or whatever the nature is. And what I found really fascinating was that in this story we don't have that. Like there's some flirtation back and forth or a little bit of banter,
yeah.
but it's not consummated. It's not like by the end of the story he and Charlie get together, or that the point all along was that actually it was just a romance.
Yeah, it's
And I
nice to
actually
be a
really
bit
appreciate.
different. Yeah, it's nice to actually be away from all that. Um,
Yeah, it was like, well, yeah, a guy and a girl can actually be friends, and like, sure, there's a little bit of layer of flirtation, but
mm,
their relationship at the end of the day is more of two equals trying to do a job and two hurt people who are trying to find someone to trust, and they do. And that trust is actually more important than whether or not they get to date or sleep together or, insert the normal hallmark
hmm
relationship of a man and a woman.
yeah.
Um, and I think to me, it makes the loss more. I was going to say the word satisfying, which is kind of a weird word, but like as someone who deals in narrative, when I say satisfying, I don't mean that it's good. I mean it's like it creates more of a feeling in you. Because if it goes the route that you always expect, which is that like they're gonna have their kiss and then that happens, you go, well, yeah, every movie I've ever seen is that.
Mm,
They had the kiss and then now something bad is gonna happen because they were supposed to be together, but now they're not gonna be together, and now I know that they liked each other all along. Great.
mm,
Whereas this was like he lost someone that he cares about, full stop. It didn't have to be about sex or dating or romance. It was
mm,
just like you just care about someone and the loss of that person hurts no matter what they are to you.
mm.
Um,
It sounds like you did a lot of research and training for the game. You know.
I think actually because this game was more future casting, there was less research and more assimilation of like the world that I see forward. In terms of the military, I was drawing on things that I had already learned from other projects. And we don't spend like being in the military is a big part of Jacob's personhood in the way that he commands himself. But in the game, in flashback and in a couple of portal things, we spend time in the military world. But it was important to me that people didn't walk away from this being like, this guy is just a soldier. Like
Mm,
that's his whole thing. Um, I think, frankly, because franchises like Call of Duty exist, like there are other places where if what you want is strictly military warfare, like you can find that. I
mm,
was always more interested in what is it to take a trained human being and put them in an environment that they can't control, and the technological aspect of here are all these things happening to this person that has skills that their skills aren't cut out for. Their skills aren't enough to sort of overcome these various technological changes that have happened while they were out.
mm. Wow, that's a lot. It's a lot. It's interesting as well. It's just there's just so many questions you can keep asking. But is there more of a moment you're especially proud of as well? I know you said about the storyline between the other female actress, but yeah,
A moment that I'm particularly proud of.
simple question really. I like to always add it in there though.
It's funny. I mean, people always ask that, and one of the things that I think folks who don't do this for a living don't realize is that so much of this process for me at least, it become in the moment, it's very specific. Like when I'm working, when I'm in a scene, it is very specific.
Mm,
But because it's so intense, my memory of the whole process becomes like it's like soup. Like
mm,
there is a larger substantive experience,
yeah.
not like, oh, these things individually stand out in my mind because it's all part of one thing in my mind. Um, there's a moment actually when Charlie sacrifices herself that it's very simple. It's literally just like looking down, like watching her having fallen and like looking over the side of the
Mm,
skyscraper. And it's simple things like that when they come out in animation that I take pride in.
right.
Because it's really difficult for the animators to recreate everything like to verisimilitude. So eyes, particularly, like the wetness of your eyes and the emotion that's happening in camera work, we're taught that what you want to have is like a secret, right? Always, there's always something happening that the audience is not in on, and it should be energy that you can read in my eyes because
Mm,
that's what we look at most of the time as human beings. It's how we evolved to like read each other, right?
mm,
And so you always want to have some kind of energy that's like just coming out. And I noticed, for example, in Mafia, the technology was in a place where sometimes they could capture that and sometimes they couldn't. It's just
yeah.
like it's very, very difficult to get that right in a
Mm,
digital space.
yeah, yeah.
And I would say the same in MindsEye. It's not a 100% across the board, but I think in that moment they did a good job of recreating what we did in the volume internally,
Mm,
which is very difficult. It's easy to recreate the movement. It's easy to recreate the blocking of a scene, but
mm,
I find it to be more difficult to recreate the inner life of an actor in a digital space. And I think they did that really well because that was one of the more emotionally pregnant moments in the whole thing.
mm, yeah. I remember I was doing the interview on Mafia before, actually. It was a good chat a few years ago. Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
you've done some incredible stuff. It's inspiring to see your work. So, yeah,
Thank you, Lloyd.
yeah. Um, so I kind of covered it a bit earlier, but I want to ask the question properly because you were talking a lot about AI earlier, and the world of social media and stuff. Do you think Mind's Eye is trying to warn us anything about tech and warfare? Um,
I
you
don't know
know,
about war because, like I said, it's not a morality tale, right? Like it's not a
mm,
here's how we should live our lives. I think it's investigating that. It's seeing what the relationship between technology and war and technology and
mm,
looks peace looks like, right? Um, and I think rather than saying this is how things are going to go, it simply puts forth like this is a possibility. And I don't think it's a very far-fetched idea, as it is um, being guinea pigs for what is it to have this thing in your pocket all the time that has
mm,
Bluetooth and is connected to satellite in the sky? Like we're all willfully signed up for this grand experiment in
mm,
humanity. Like what is it doing to our neural wiring to constantly have stuff on our phone that is releasing? It is eliciting, it's not releasing, is eliciting dopamine responses every 45 seconds. Like
mm,
I don't know about you, but the amount of times that I mindlessly pick up my phone, open Instagram, open a game, open an email to see something from someone just to get that little, it's not conscious. I'm not like, oh, I'd really like to get some serotonin real quick. Let me see if anybody's liked the Instagram story. That's
mm,
not the case. I just find myself picking it up and opening it and being like, oh, I didn't need to do that at all. Oh, look, someone liked the thing. Okay. And that's done just as quickly as it came.
mm,
And 20 years ago, that didn't exist. Like
mm,
that wasn't a thing. I'm at the weird age point. I'm 36. I remember when dial-up internet came out.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, I don't know, seven-ish, right?
mm,
And being like, wow, how crazy it is to have this thing in your house that like you can connect to all the other things around the world.
yeah,
And then I remember when the internet speed started picking up, but you had to pay more.
yeah,
So some people had really shitty slow internet. Some people had what like closer to what we all have now.
mm,
Then I remember when kids started getting smartphones, and my parents were like, no, listen, we're poor. We also don't think it's necessarily great for your development. You don't get to have a phone. So I didn't get a smartphone until I was like 18 in college, in
Wow.
university, I should say. Whereas other kids had phones, smartphones in my high school, right? So some 14-year-old walking around. And at that point, there was no social media,
Yeah.
but they had a phone that could go on the internet. So something like, oh, I want to check the NBA scores. Suddenly there was this kid that everyone would like flock to be like, all right, what's the score of this game? Or, of course, because you're a kid in high school, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they're pulling up nude pictures of Misty from fucking Pokemon. You're like, let's all go to his phone to look at the photos. Um, but as the technology has increased, and now we live in an age where I'm interacting with adults who are 20, 21, 22 years old who've never known a world without this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is that doing to our brains and our capacity to retain information, but also the spaces that we imagine? And I used to be very down on it. I used to be very only like this is negative and only has bad consequences.
Yeah.
And I still maintain that there are a lot of negative consequences from sort of um, offloading a lot of mental labor to a device. For example, talk about memory. I'm a big dancer. And so now when I take a class, I always take a video of whatever the routine is. But
Mm.
I've noticed that since I've been taking videos, I no longer feel the pressure to actually retain the routine in my brain because I have an external brain.
Yeah.
So the external brain retains all that information while this brain is doing other work, quote unquote. But
Yeah.
I
That
want
is the
that
mind
technology,
control.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the point of taking that class was so that I remember this, not so that my phone remembers this. It doesn't fucking matter if my phone can remember it.
Mm.
Um, but on the flip side, someone recently put it to me as like what they are seeing in younger kids is their ability to imagine a digital space, so four-dimensional space, or their spatial reasoning, like literally the thing that tells me, okay, this desk is 6 inches in front of me, and my backyard is about 4 feet away. Their spatial reasoning has more of a there's more imagination there because they're not always thinking literal space. They're often thinking in digital space, which is just it's just different. It's a different concept of reality.
Mm.
I find that fascinating. And even the relationship between like, do you want to spend time outside in the world interacting with tactile information, or do you want to spend time inside, but in a digital space interacting
Mm.
with digital information? I find that fascinating. And that's definitely, I'm at the intersection of the two generations because my parents are like, I don't want to be on a computer. And
Yeah.
I was at the age where I love it. And part of the reason that I'm a gamer is because I was in like this golden age where as the N60, maybe I'm just old and being like the N64 was the golden age, but it really felt like as games were coming out at that time, it was revolutionizing how kids thought of play. Like before my generation, there were not LAN parties. There were not kids sitting around like 5 kids waiting to play GoldenEye. And that didn't exist. So
Yeah.
in my generation, it was born this idea of like you and your homies are just like in a room, Mountain Dew. We're in it. We're playing Halo for 16 hours until our thumbs break. Like
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. And obviously, so much has changed and evolved since those days. But the intersection of how human brains worked before Google Maps. Like I was there. I used to have first when I was a little kid, we had an almanac. We literally had a book of maps that you used when you wanted to go on a road trip or whatever. Then when the dial-up internet came out, you would go to a website, you would print out the directions, and you'd hope that, there was no accident or construction or whatever. So your 5-hour road trip, you were like, okay, we're looking for exit 33. And so until exit 33, we're just here in the car because there's no internet and we're just talking or whatever we're doing. And to the point now where some people can't even tell you where their school is. Like
Yeah.
they drive to that place every morning, but they
Yeah.
couldn't
We
tell
can't
you how to
work it
get
out. Yeah. 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 Because we're relying on technology to tell us ourselves. So,
there. Yeah.
hmm. Wow. Yeah. Scary times.
All these sorts of things. The hope is that technology should, in theory, be making our lives better, not worse, right?
Mm.
Um, and my hope is that as with information comes awareness, and with awareness comes choice. and that we start making smarter choices about how we regulate these, whether it's social media and the amount of dopamine or like whatever that relationship is. It's very drug like. You know what I mean? It's an addictive. Like I need to have this fire in my brain,
Mm,
um, and how we make choices that regulate that need,
mm,
whether it's at a corporate level or just as individuals. Like now that I have become aware of that dopamine response, I took the step of like setting the timer on your phone where it's like you can only use a certain app for so long per day. So
mm.
you set a limit of like, okay, 1 hour for Instagram or 30 minutes or whatever it is,
Yeah, I
right?
think I'm too
And
addicted
then,
for that. I think I'm too
right,
addicted for doing something like that. Yeah.
honestly, I had to do it because it made me at least confront directly, like, this is what you're doing. This is how much time you spent on this thing. You can
Mm,
still choose to ignore it, but you've done it. You
mm,
said that no more than an hour a day was like healthy, and
mm,
you've reached an hour. So if you're doing it more, you are choosing to do the thing that you think is unhealthy.
mm,
Um, but my hope is that we find a way to use this technology responsibly so that it's a net positive, not a net negative.
mm. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot going on. With all the news stuff and the news being blown out of proportion and things being exaggerated, just real quickly, what's your view on the war at the moment and Donald Trump um, being involved with that?
I am anti-war in general. I don't believe that there's a reason that anyone needs to die for the sake of land. The only time that death makes sense to me is when it happens organically or if it's in self-defense. And that last phrase in self-defense is a very, some people want to debate it. I don't really think it's much debatable. This goes for all parties. Like I'm here, I think that there are a number of very twisted societies in the world. And I am completely fine going on record saying America's one of them. We have a lot of things real ass backwards as to who's coming for us and why. Um, I don't actually disagree that there are people in the world who wish harm upon the United States. Where I disagree is the reason why, in
Okay.
that they're just evil or that they are jealous or that I think it's a fool's errand and I think it's irresponsible and lacks self awareness as an American, as a person who's born and raised here and is also the son of immigrants. So people who moved to the United States not speaking English, my mother becoming a U.S. citizen, my father being deported for overstaying his visa.
Wow.
Um, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge that this country has a history of inserting itself into other nations' affairs. Sometimes, maybe one time, at a moment in history that made a lot of sense and was necessary. And that time is World War II. And basically, the rest of them was like, you're sticking your shit where it doesn't belong and you perceive yourself as being helpful. Who knows? But there's also a history of resource extraction. And unfortunately, this country is born of a settler colonial mindset that has continued to pervade the world and I think is fundamentally unhealthy.
Yeah.
The idea of any country going into any other country and extracting resources causes resentment. It causes people to think you're full of shit when you talk about it being the greatest place on earth. Because it's not great. It's not great to go to someone else's home, take their food, take their stuff, and then tell them that they're the problem.
Mm,
And while I don't think that that means that it's okay for people to, for example, um, what happened on 9/11, I'm certainly not like, that was good stuff. Um, but I think it is a lack of self awareness to not understand where that comes from.
mm,
And that doesn't make it okay. The world is much more complicated than right, wrong, good, bad. But in terms of what's happening now, I also am fine going on record as saying I don't trust this person, being Donald Trump, to make decisions for the well being of this country. I think he
wow.
has a long track record showing that his decisions are not in service of the people of the United States. Mostly they're in service of his own business interests, and occasionally they're in service of the business interests of his friends. I do not believe he actually represents the beating heart of this country. And even if even if there was a reason for this to happen, I don't trust him as the person to shepherd us through it with grace. Um,
Well,
yeah.
well. You have your view, and that's a fair view to have. Everyone's opinion is entitled, so yeah, and it's not looking good at the moment, is it? So yeah,
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean,
yeah,
once again, it's like it's not my job. And I can have all the opinions in the world, but at the end of the day, I have not made the choices to put myself in a position of power to influence those decisions. So all I can do is in an interview with someone like yourself is like share my perspective with the caveat that it don't mean shit.
mm,
And that is something that I wish more people took ownership of.
mm,
I'm a very opinionated person, and I'm sure you can tell that in the way that I'm speaking to you, I am doing my best to sort of like be a little clipped and a little personable. Like I'm not just expressing myself 1,000% the way that I express myself in my house.
yeah,
And I think that's okay. And I think more importantly, the awareness of like, this is just my opinion. I'm not any
yeah,
righter than any other human. I'm just not. And neither is the dude who happens to have the nuclear codes. He's
mm,
just not.
mm,
And unfortunately, I would rather have someone in the position to cause catastrophic destruction via a decision that I trust their impulse control. I
mm,
trust their ability to, if we are going to make a decision, then we are going to have actually considered all of this information. Um, and regardless of whether or not I like the man, like his politics, any of that,
mm,
more importantly to me is that it's someone making a considered, careful decision because that's a decision of great magnitude. We
mm,
joke about World War III. The fact that Russia has already said we will back Iran, like obviously North Korea is in line with it. It is shaping up to be a very similar experience as the Allies versus the Axis,
mm.
and like that's not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah. Do you think it's getting close then? Do you think it's a thing that can happen quite quickly?
I wonder because I hope that, especially in the age of the internet, we are all aware enough that like the amount of catastrophe that any of these people are, the United States included, setting off that first nuclear bomb is essentially like in my head assured mutual destruction.
Yeah.
There's not like there's not really a safety valve here. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Do
There's
you
enough
mean
nuclear.
Trump's one or the war in general? Do you mean Trump's or
In general, if anyone
yeah?
was to
Oh,
set
okay.
off a nuclear,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
say for example, if Iran had developed a nuclear weapon, set it off in Israel, like that would immediately the European bloc and the United States would take action, right?
Mm,
And then, of course, so would Russia, North Korea, maybe other countries that I will not just start throwing names in there because, again, not an expert. I'm
mm,
just referring to what I have read in mainstream media, having seen already people putting out publicly like where their stance is.
mm,
Um, that would be a ripple effect of like, okay, now like what, 6 to 7 nukes have been set off, and like 2/3 of the world is covered in radioactive material and uninhabitable, which inevitably will 10, 15 years down the line have effects in everywhere else that wasn't actually bombed,
mm,
right? Let's say that every neutral country was left relatively unscathed. So like tiny Pacific islands were fine, Norway's fine, the Scandinavian countries who all sit out of everything is fine. In 10, 15 years, all that radioactive shit is just going to waft over to where they are anyway. It's going to affect their ocean. It's going to affect their fish. It's going to affect their soil. It's going to affect the rain. Like, so the assured mutual destruction of anyone setting off anything, at least to me, is so obvious that I would hope that none of them do. Like,
mm,
what is to be gained by being the king of ashes? But at the
mm,
same time, that's why I say I would rather have someone in the position of power to make that decision who has impulse control to recognize that possibility, and not just possibility, but probability, than someone who is interested in posing for power. I do
mm,
not care about the appearance of power. It doesn't matter,
mm,
especially when nothing exists. If
mm.
you're the strongest man in the world and you're the last man in the world, who cares? If you're the president of the apocalypse, who cares?
Mm. Wow. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, 100.
Awesome.